The ridge was ours before it had a name. My great-grandfather carved it out of the wilderness in 1919. Back when the pines were so thick you could barely see the sky. He built the cabin with his own hands, splitting logs with an axe that left calluses like badges of war. The land wasn't just dirt and trees, it was a vow, a promise that we'd hold it, no matter what. My father taught me to walk these trails, to know every root, every stone, every bend in the creek that runs cold even in July. Now I was teaching my son, Caleb, 8 years old, with eyes like his mother's and a heart that beat for the wild. He didn't care for toys or screens. He cared for the hawk's nest in the old oak, the way the wind sounded when it tore through the valley, and the fire pit where we burned cedar every night to keep the ghosts at bay. Caleb was small for his age, all elbows and knees, but he moved with purpose. Every evening, just as the sun bled orange across the ridge, he'd drag a dented metal bucket to the edge of the clearing. He'd scoop ash from the fire pit, careful as a surgeon, and sprinkle it around the base of the pines. "Keeps the beetles away," he'd say, repeating what I'd taught him, what my father taught me. It was our ritual, our way of tending to the land that had tended to us for generations. The ash wasn't just ash, it was protection, a circle drawn in the dirt to say, "This is ours. Stay out." But nothing stays out forever. Not wolves, not storms, not people. And people, they're the worst kind of predator. They don't just take, they demand. They justify. They come with smiles and clipboards and rules you never agreed to. That's what happened when Marla showed up. Marla, with her pressed khakis and her fake laugh and her laminated badge that read Ridgeview Community. Liaison, community. As if the ridge needed her to tell it what it was. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the air smells like pine and promise. I was on the porch, sharpening my grandfather's old hatchet, the blade still keen after decades. Caleb was out by the fire pit, bucket in hand, humming some tune he'd made up, scattering ash like he was blessing the ground. The creek bubbled in the distance, and the ridge felt alive, like it was breathing with us. Then I heard tires on gravel, a sound that doesn't belong here. Not the soft crunch of a neighbor's truck, but the sharp, impatient grind of someone who drives like they're owed the road. I stood, hatchet still in hand, and watched a white SUV pull up the drive. The door opened, and out stepped Marla. She was all angle-sharp cheekbones, sharper smile, hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She carried a tablet, not a clipboard, but it was the same weapon. She didn't walk, she marched, her boots kicking up dust like she was claiming every inch of it. "Good morning," she called, voice bright as a knife. "You must be the property owner." I didn't answer right away. I was watching her eyes, the way they scanned the cabin, the fire pit, the pines, like she was already measuring them for sale. "This is private land," I said, setting the hatchet down slow. "No soliciting." Her smile didn't waver, but it tightened, like a snake coiling. "Oh, I'm not selling anything," she said. "I'm here to help. My name's Marla, Ridgeview Community Liaison. We're establishing a new Homeowners Association to ensure the Ridge meets modern standards. Safety, aesthetics, property value, SEO, the things that matter. There's no HOA here," I said, stepping off the porch. "And we don't need one." She tilted her head, like I was a child who didn't understand. "That's the thing," she said, tapping her tablet. "The vote's already happened. Democracy in action. The Ridge is under Ridgeview jurisdiction now, and I'm here to go over compliance." "Compliance?" I repeated, my voice low. Caleb had stopped humming. He stood by the fire pit, bucket dangling from one hand, watching us. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for me to make this right. Marla didn't look at him. She was too busy swiping her tablet, pulling up some document that glowed official. "Your fire pit, for starters," she said. "It's 12 feet from the tree line. Code requires 15. And the ash scattering? That's a fire hazard. You'll need to cease immediately." I took a step closer. "That ash has been protecting these trees since before you were born. You don't get to waltz in here and tell us how to live." Her smile sharpened. "It's not about you. It's about the community. Uniformity, safety, progress. I've already noted the cabin's exterior unpainted wood, non-compliant with aesthetic guidelines. And that axe," she glanced at the hatchet on the porch. "Open display of weapons is prohibited." I laughed, short and hard. This is a tool, not a weapon. And this cabin stood for a century. It doesn't need your paint or your permission. She tapped her tablet again, undeterred. You'll receive a formal notice by mail. Fines start next week if you don't comply. Oh, and the child, she finally looked at Caleb, her eyes narrowing. He shouldn't be handling ash. It's unsanitary. Could be a health violation. That's when I felt it, the same heat I'd felt years ago in the desert, when I was still carrying a badge and a gun for Uncle Sam. The kind of heat that says, you just crossed a line, and there's no going back. You don't talk about my son, I said, my voice steady but burning. And you don't set foot on this land again. Marla didn't flinch. She just smiled, that cold, corporate smile that says, I've already won. Read the bylaws, she said. They're clear. This ridge belongs to all of us now. She turned on her heel and marched back to her SUV, leaving a trail of dust and venom in her wake. Caleb stepped up beside me, his bucket clinking against his leg. Dad, he said, voice small but steady, is she gonna take the fire pit? I put a hand on his shoulder, my eyes still on the SUV as it disappeared down the drive. No one's taking anything, I said. Not her, not anyone. But I knew better. I'd seen her kind before, paper pushers who wield rules like knives, cutting away at what's yours because they think they're entitled to it. Marla wasn't here to help. She was here to conquer. And if she came for my son, for our land, for the ashes we spread to honor the dead, I'd make her wish she'd never set foot on this ridge. The next week was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. Every morning, Caleb went out to the fire pit, bucket in hand, scattering ash like nothing had changed. But I saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way he glanced at the driveway like he was waiting for that SUV to come back. I didn't sleep much. I spent my nights on the porch, hatchet nearby, listening to the creek and the wind, waiting for the sound of gravel. I'd been a federal agent for 12 years, Seth, running ops in places where the law was more suggestion than rule. I knew what it meant to protect what's yours, and I knew the cost. The letter came on a Friday, stuffed in our mailbox like a bomb in an envelope. No return address, just a seal that read Ridgeview Community Association. I tore it open. Pages of jargon, setback requirements, aesthetic standards, fire safety protocols, fines for the fire pit, fines for the cabin's unapproved exterior, fines for unauthorized land modification because of Caleb's ash. At the bottom, in bold, failure to comply will result in legal action, including potential property seizure. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fire pit. Caleb watched from the porch, his eyes wide. They can't take our land, can they? He asked. I knelt beside him, my hand on the back of his neck. They can try, I said, but they'd have to go through me first. He nodded, but I could see the fear in him. The same fear I'd felt as a kid when my father told me stories of men who'd tried to take this ridge before loggers, developers, bureaucrats with briefcases. They all came with promises of progress, but they left with nothing. This time, though, it wasn't just about the land. It was about Caleb, about the way he looked at those pines like they were his brothers, about the way he carried that bucket like it was his duty. Marla didn't know who she was dealing with, but she was about to find out. The next morning, the gravel crunched again. I was ready. I'd spent the night rigging motion sensors along the driveway, the kind I used to use in the field to catch smugglers crossing borders. They'd ping my phone if anything heavier than a deer set foot on our land. When the alert went off at 6:47 a.m., I was already on the porch, coffee in one hand, hatchet in the other. Caleb was still asleep, his bucket by the door, ash smudged on the handle from his small hands. Marla's SUV rolled up, but this time she wasn't alone. A man climbed out of the passenger seat, mid-30s, skinny, with a nervous twitch and a polo shirt that screamed intern. He carried a camera, the kind you use for property surveys, and a clipboard. Marla had upgraded her arsenal. "Good morning," she called, same fake cheer as before. "This is Ethan, my assistant. We're here to document non-compliance." I stepped off the porch, hatchet still in hand. "You're trespassing," I said. "Leave." Marla didn't blink. She tapped her tablet, then pointed at the fire pit. "Still non-compliant. And the ashathon, get a shot of that. It's a clear violation." Ethan fumbled with the camera, his hands shaking. I took a step toward him. "Put that down, kid," I said. "You don't want to be part of this." He froze, looking from me to Marla. She snapped, "Ethan, do your job. This is for the community." I turned to her, my voice low. "There is no community. There's just you, bullying people who never asked for your rules." She laughed, sharp and cold. "You're the bully here, waving that axe around. This ridge needs order, safety, standards. You're living like it's 1920. We're moving forward." Caleb's voice cut through the air. "Dad," he was on the porch, bucket in hand, his eyes locked on Marla. I could see the bruise of fear in them, but also something else of defiance. He stepped forward, clutching the bucket tighter. Marla's eyes flicked to him, and her smile twisted. "That child shouldn't be out here. It's unsafe. Ethan, note that men are engaging in hazardous activity." That was it. The heat in my chest exploded. I dropped the hatchet, not because I was backing down, but because I didn't need it. Not yet. I crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, grabbed her tablet, and smashed it against the ground. The screen cracked like ice on the creek. Ethan gasped, stumbling back. Marla's face went white, then red. "Yo, you can't do that," she shrieked. "That's destruction of property." "You're on my property," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "And you're scaring my son. You don't get to talk about him. You don't get to look at him. You get to leave." She took a step back, but her eyes were still defiant. "This isn't over," she said. "You'll hear from our lawyers. You'll lose everything." I leaned in close, so close I could smell her perfume, sharp and chemical. "You touch my kid, my land, or my trees again, and you won't need a lawyer. You'll need a miracle." She held my gaze for a moment, then turned and marched back to her SUV, Ethan scrambling behind her. As they peeled out, gravel spraying, Caleb stepped up beside me. "She's gonna come back, isn't she?" I nodded. "Yeah, but so are we." The next day, the ridge felt different. The air was heavier, like the sky was holding its breath. Caleb went out to the fire pit anyway, scattering ash like it was his job, like Marla hadn't shaken his world. But I could see it in the way he moved quicker, more cautious, like he was waiting for her to appear out of the pines. I didn't tell him I'd spent the night on the phone with old contacts from ATF, pulling strings, digging into Marla's so-called Ridgeview Community Association. It didn't exist, not officially. She'd filed no paperwork with the county, no legal charter. It was a scam, a power grab dressed up as bureaucracy. But scams don't die easy, and neither do people like Marla. When she came back, it was at dawn. The motion sensors pinged my phone at 5:30 a.m. I was already up, coffee cold on the table, my old service pistol cleaned and loaded in the lockbox. I didn't plan to use it, not yet, but I wasn't taking chances. I stepped onto the porch just as her SUV crested the drive. This time, she had a new weapon, a county sheriff's deputy. He climbed out of the passenger seat, hand resting on his holster, eyes scanning the property like he was expecting a firefight. Marla didn't bother with pleasantries. "This is Deputy Hargrove," she said, pointing at the man beside her. "I've filed a complaint. Destruction of property, intimidation, and non-compliance with community standards. You're to cease all activities and vacate the premises pending a hearing." I looked at Hargrove. He was young, maybe 25, with a face that said he'd rather be anywhere else. "You got a warrant?" I asked. He shifted, uncomfortable. "No, sir. This is a civil matter. I'm just here to ensure compliance." "There's no HOA," I said, stepping forward. "No legal authority." I checked. "She's got no jurisdiction here." Marla's face tightened. "You don't get to decide that. The community." "There's no community," I snapped. "You forged signatures, fake votes, and now you're dragging a deputy out here to bully a family off their land. You picked the wrong fight." Hargrove raised a hand. "Sir, calm down. I'm just here to keep the peace." "Then keep it," I said. "Start with her." Caleb appeared on the porch, bucket in hand. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. Marla's eyes locked onto him, and I saw the same predatory glint she'd had before. "That child," she said, pointing, "is in violation. Scattering ash is a fire hazard. Deputy, you need to confiscate that bucket." Hargrove hesitated, looking from Marla to Caleb. "Ma'am, he's a kid." He's breaking the law, she snapped. Seize it. That's when it happened. Marlo lunged forward, faster than I expected, and grabbed the bucket from Caleb's hands. He stumbled, falling to his knees, and before I could move, she swung the bucket back and clipped him on the shoulder. Not hard, but hard enough. Caleb cried out, clutching his arm, and the world went red. I didn't think. I didn't speak. I moved. I grabbed Marla by the wrist, twisted it until she dropped the bucket, and shoved her back. She stumbled, falling into the dirt, her khakis smudged with ash. Hargrove drew his taser. Sir, step back now. You saw her, I roared. She hit my son. Marla scrambled to her feet, screaming. He assaulted me. Arrest him. But Hargrove wasn't moving. He was looking at Caleb, who was still on the ground, tears in his eyes but not crying, not giving her the satisfaction. Ma'am, Hargrove said, voice tight, you just struck a minor. I'm gonna need you to calm down. I knelt beside Caleb, checking his shoulder. It was red, bruising already. You okay? I whispered. He nodded, but his eyes were on Marla, burning with something I hadn't seen in him before. Not fear, anger. I stood, facing Marla. You're done, I said. You crossed a line, and there's no coming back. She laughed, but it was shaky, desperate. You think you scare me? I've got lawyers, connections. This ridge is mine. I stepped closer, my voice low and cold. You've got nothing. And if you ever touch my son again, I'll bury you under these pines. Hargrove put a hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, you need to leave. Now. She jerked away from him, but she knew she'd lost. For now. She climbed into her SUV, slamming the door, and sped off, leaving Hargrove standing there, looking like he'd just walked into a war he didn't sign up for. Sir, he said, I'm sorry. I didn't know she'd. Save it, I said. Just make sure she doesn't come back. He nodded and left. I turned to Caleb, who was standing now, bucket in hand, ash smudged across his cheek. She's not gonna stop, is she? He asked. No, I said. But neither are we. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, my old ATF badge on the table in front of me. I hadn't touched it in years, not since I left the agency after Caleb's mother died. But I still had contacts, people who owed me favors. I made calls, sent emails, dug deeper into Marla's operation. By dawn, I had confirmation. Her Ridgeview Community Association was a front. She'd been fleecing neighbors for months, forging documents, skimming dues for personal use. She wasn't just a bullish, was a criminal. When she came back, I was ready. And this time, she wouldn't walk away. The ridge didn't sleep after Marla's last visit. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning splits a tree. Caleb went back to his ritual the next morning, dragging his bucket to the fire pit, scattering ash around the pines with the same quiet determination. But his eyes darted to the driveway more than they used to, and his hands gripped the bucket a little tighter. He was 8, but he'd already learned the world wasn't Safinite even here, on land that had held our family for a century. I watched him from the porch, my coffee cold, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. I'd spent the night digging through Marla's paper trail, calling in favors from old ATF contacts. What I found wasn't just a bully with a tablet. Marla was a grifter, a vulture circling small communities like ours, preying on people too tired or too scared to fight back. She'd done this before 3 towns. For years, millions in dues funneled into offshore accounts. But she'd never met someone like me, and she'd never touched someone like Caleb. The motion sensors pinged at 7:12 a.m., a low buzz on my phone that felt like a gunshot. I stepped onto the porch, my old service knife tucked into my belt, not drawn but ready. Caleb froze mid-scatter, ash dusting his sneakers, and looked at me. Is it her? He asked, voice steady but small. Stay there, I said, nodding toward the fire pit. Keep doing what you do. He nodded, but he didn't move. His eyes followed the driveway as the white SUV crested the hill. Marla was back, but this time she'd brought reinforcements. 2 men climbed out with her Ethan, the nervous intern from before, clutching his camera like a shield, and a new guy, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, wearing a cheap suit and a smirk that said he'd been in fights and liked them. Marla's badge gleamed on her blazer, and she carried a new tablet, shiny and uncracked, like she was daring me to smash this one too. "Good morning," she called, her voice dripping with that same sugary venom. "This is Mr. Kessler, our legal consultant. We're here to enforce compliance and serve you with a cease and desist order." I stepped off the porch, my boots crunching gravel. "You're trespassing again," I said, "and you're not serving anything on my land." Kessler spoke up, his voice gravelly, like he smoked too much. "You're in violation of Ridgeview Community Association bylaws. Fire pits too close to the tree line, ash disposal's a hazard, and your cabin's exterior is non-compliant. You've got 48 hours to correct or face eviction proceedings." I laughed, short and sharp. "Eviction? You don't own this ridge. You don't own a damn thing." Marla's smile didn't waver. "The association does. We represent the community. You're the outlier." She paused, glancing at her tablet. "Jameson, you and your son are disrupting the harmony of this ridge." Caleb stepped forward, bucket in hand, ash smudged across his cheek. "We're not hurting anyone," he said, his voice louder than I expected. "The trees need the ash. It's what we do." Marla's eyes flicked to him, and I saw at a that predatory glint. "Children shouldn't be handling hazardous materials," she said. "It's reckless, dangerous. Ethan, document this." Ethan fumbled with his camera, his hands shaking worse than before. Kessler stepped closer, his smirk widening. "You heard her, kid. Put the bucket down." I moved between them and Caleb, my hand resting on the knife at my belt. "You don't talk to my son," I said, my voice low, steady. "The kind I used in the field when I needed someone to know I wasn't bluffing. And you don't touch his bucket." Kessler chuckled, but it was forced, like he was trying to hide nerves. Big talk for a guy who's about to lose his house. Marla tapped her tablet, undeterred. "We've already filed with the county. Your property's been flagged for non-compliance. Fines are accruing daily. And after yesterday's assault," she pointed at herself, like she was the victim, "we're pressing charges." I took a step closer, close enough to see the sweat beading on her forehead despite the morning chill. "You hit my son," I said. "You think you can walk onto my land, hurt my kid, and hide behind a fake HOA? I know who you are, Marla. I know about the accounts in Belize, the forged signatures in Cedar Creek, the families you bankrupted in Millwood. You're not a liaison. You're a thief." Her face didn't change, but her eyes did narrowed, like a cornered animal's. "You're delusional," she said, "and you're out of time. Kessler, serve him." Kessler reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded document. I didn't let him hand it to me. I grabbed it, tore it in half, and tossed it into the fire pit. "That's what I think of your papers," I said. Marla's smile finally cracked. "You'll regret that," she hissed. "Ethan, get the footage. We're escalating this." Ethan raised his camera, but before he could snap a photo, Caleb moved. He didn't say a word, just swung his bucket and flung a cloud of ash straight at Marla. It hit her like a gray storm, coating her blazer, her hair, her precious tablet. She shrieked, stumbling back, swiping at her face like she'd been burned. Kessler lunged toward Caleb, but I was faster. I grabbed his arm, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him against the SUV. The metal groaned under his weight. "Touch my kid," I growled, "and you won't walk off this ridge." Hargrave's patrol car rolled up just then, lights flashing, but no siren. He stepped out, hand on his holster, eyes scanning the scene. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Marla, still coughing, pointed at me. "He assaulted Kessler, and that child threw ash at me. Arrest them." Hargrove looked at Caleb, then at me, then at the ash smudged across Marla's blazer. "Ma'am," he said, "you're on private property. Again. I told you last time, you need a warrant or legal authority." "She doesn't have either," I said. "Her HOA's a fraud. I've got proof, bank records, forged documents, complaints from 3 counties. She's a con artist." Hargrave's eyes narrowed. "That true?" Marla's voice went shrill. "He's lying. He's a violent maniac. Look at what he did to Kessler." Kessler, still pinned against the SUV, grunted. "Let me go, man. This is assault." I tightened my grip. "You came for my son. You don't get to cry victim." Hargrove raised a hand. "Everybody calm down. Jameson, let him go. I'll handle this." I released Kessler, who stumbled back, rubbing his arm. Hargrove turned to Marla. Ma'am, I'm gonna need to see your association's charter. Proof of authority. Now. Marla froze, her tablet clutched tight. It's at the office, she said. But I assure you. Then you're trespassing, Hargrove cut in. And if what he says about fraud is true, you're in deeper trouble than you think. Marla's face twisted, but she didn't back down. This isn't over, she said, glaring at me. You think you're untouchable because you were some hotshot Fed? I've got resources. I'll bury you. I stepped closer, my voice barely above a whisper. You touched my son. You don't get to walk away from that. Hargrove put a hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, you and your friends need to leave. Now, or I'm cuffing you for trespassing and assault. Marla jerked away, but she knew she was outmaneuvered. She climbed into her SUV, Kessler and Ethan scrambling after her. As they peeled out, Caleb stepped up beside me, bucket still in hand. She's coming back, isn't she? I nodded. Yeah, but we're ready. The ridge buzzed with whispers after that. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years started showing up at the cabin, their faces tight with anger and fear. Mrs. Larson from the valley, who'd lived here longer than I had, told me Marla had fined her $800 for planting wildflowers instead of approved shrubs. Mr. Tate, a retired mechanic, said she'd threatened to seize his garage for unpermitted modifications because he'd built a ramp for his wheelchair. Even young Jenny, who ran a bakery out of her trailer, said Marla had reported her to the health department for unsanitary conditions. After she refused to pay a $500 community fee, each story was a cut. A wound Marla had carved into this ridge, and I realized we weren't just fighting for our land. We were fighting for everyone's. That night, I called a meeting. Not an official Nano bylaws, no tablets, just people. We gathered around the fire pit, the flames crackling under a sky heavy with stars. Caleb sat beside me, his bucket at his feet, listening as the neighbors spoke. Mrs. Larson brought a folder of notices, all stamped with Marla's fake HOA seal. Tay had emails, threats disguised as friendly reminders. Jenny had screenshots of Marla's demands, each one more absurd than the last. And then there was Tommy, the kid from down the hill, 16 and skinny, with a phone that never left his hand. He'd been filming everything: Marla's visits, her threats, Caleb's ash cloud. It's on X, he said, holding up his phone. 2 million views already. People are pissed. I stood, the fire casting shadows across my face. She's not just after me, I said. She's after all of us. This isn't about fire pits or wildflowers or ramps. It's about control. She thinks she can scare us, fine us, push us out. But this ridge doesn't belong to her. It belongs to us. Mrs. Larson nodded, her hands trembling but her voice firm. She told me my wildflowers were a disgrace. Said they lowered property values. Those flowers were my mother's. She planted them before she died. Tate gripped his cane. She said my garage was an eyesore. I built it with my hands. Same as you built this cabin, Jameson. Jenny's voice shook, but she didn't look away. She shut down my bakery. I had to sell my car to pay the fines. I'm not letting her take my home too. I looked at Caleb, his eyes reflecting the fire. My son's been scattering ash on these trees since he could walk. It's not just tradition. It's who we are. She hit him for it. She hit him because she thinks she can. Because she thinks we'll let her. The crowd went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a storm gathering. Tommy raised his phone. Yo, chat's going wild. They're calling her HOA Hitler. They want blood. I didn't smile. I didn't need blood. I needed justice. We're not fighting her with fists, I said. We're fighting her with truth. She's a fraud. I've got proof: bank records, forged signatures, complaints from other towns. But we need more. We need everything you've got. Notices, emails, recordings. We're taking her down, but we're doing it together. Mrs. Larson stood, holding her folder like a weapon. I'm in. Tate nodded. Me too. Jenny wiped her eyes. Let's burn her kingdom down. Caleb looked up at me, his voice barely a whisper. Can I help? I put a hand on his shoulder. You already are. The next morning, the ridge felt alive, like it was waking up after years of sleep. Neighbors started pooling their evidence, stacking it like firewood. Tommy set up a group chat, linking everyone on the ridge, sharing links to his live streams and Marla's threats. By noon, we had a dossier, hundreds of pages of notices, emails, forged documents, and recordings. I sent it to my old ATF contact, a guy named Ruiz who owed me a favor from a bust in '09. He was with the FBI now, white-collar crime division. "This is gold," he said over the phone. "She's been on our radar, but we didn't have enough to move. You just gave us a case." But Marla wasn't waiting for the feds. She came back that afternoon, her SUV roaring up the drive like she owned it. This time, she had a new player, a lawyer, slick and polished, with a suit that cost more than my truck. Kessler was there too, his smirk replaced by a scowl, and Ethan, still clutching his camera, looking like he wanted to bolt. Marla didn't bother with her fake smile. "You've gone too far," she said, pointing at me. "You've spread lies, incited your neighbors, destroyed property. This is Mr. Vaughn, our attorney. He's filing an injunction to seize your property for non-compliance and defamation." Vaughn stepped forward, holding a thick envelope. "You've been served," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "You'll vacate the premises within 72 hours, or we'll escalate to criminal charges." I didn't take the envelope. I looked at Marla, then at Vaughn. "You're on my land," I said. "You've got no authority here. Your HOA's a sham, and I've got the receipts." Vaughn's smile didn't waver. "You're a former federal agent, Mr. Jameson. You should know better than to interfere with legal proceedings." I stepped closer, my voice low. "And you should know better than to back a con artist who assaults kids." Marla's face twisted. "You're a liar. You attacked me. You." She didn't finish. Caleb stepped forward, bucket in hand, ash smudged across his knuckles. "You hit me," he said, his voice clear and sharp. "You hurt my shoulder. You scared my friends. You're the liar." The air went still. Vaughn's smile faltered. Kessler shifted, looking at Marla like he wasn't sure whose side he was on. Ethan's camera was rolling, and I knew Tommy was somewhere nearby, live streaming to millions. Marla lunged toward Caleb, her hand raised like she was going to grab him again. I didn't think. I grabbed her wrist, twisted it, and shoved her back. She stumbled, falling into Kessler, who caught her but looked like he regretted it. Vaughn shouted, "That's assault. You're done." Hargreaves' patrol car screeched up the drive, lights flashing. He jumped out, hand on his taser. "What the hell's going on?" Marla pointed at me, screaming. "He attacked me. Arrest him." But Caleb spoke up, his voice cutting through her lies. "She tried to hit me again." Dad stopped her. Hargrove looked at Caleb, then at me, then at the crowd gathering behind Usmers. Larson, Tate, Jenny, and half a dozen others, phones raised, recording everything. Tommy stepped out from behind a tree, his phone aimed at Marla. "It's live," he said. 10 million views. They saw it all. Hargrove turned to Marla. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to come with me. We've got reports of fraud, assault, and trespassing. You're not walking away this time." Marla's face went white. "You can't, this is outrageous. I'm the victim." I stepped forward, my badge in hand, the silver seal catching the sunlight. "I'm James Jameson, former ATF. I've got evidence of your crimes, forged documents, embezzlement, assault on a minor. You're not a victim. You're a predator." Vaughn tried to intervene. "Officer, this is a civil matter." "Not anymore," Hargrove said, pulling out his cuffs. "Mum, turn around." Marla screamed as the cuffs clicked around her wrists, her tablet falling to the ground. Screen cracking again. Kessler backed away, hands raised, like he wanted no part of this. Ethan dropped his camera, muttering, "I didn't sign up for this." As Hargrove led Marla to the patrol car, she turned to me, her eyes wild. "This isn't over, Jameson. I'll come back. I'll ruin you." I leaned in close, my voice calm but cold. "You come back, and you'll find out what happens when you push a father too far." The crowd cheered as the patrol car drove off, Marla's screams fading into the distance. Caleb stood beside me, bucket in hand, ash smudged across his cheek. "Is it over?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet, but we're winning." That night, the fire pit burned brighter than ever. The neighbors stayed, sharing stories, passing around beers and coffee, their voices rising with hope for the first time in months. Tommy's livestream had hit 15 million views, and comments were pouring in from across the country, people who'd fought their own Marlas. Their own HOA letters, their own tyrants. Caleb sat by the fire, his bucket at his feet, listening to the adults talk, his eyes bright with something new pride. But I knew Marla wasn't done. People like her don't quit. They regroup. They come back meaner, with better lawyers and bigger lies. I looked at the fire, the flames licking the night, and felt the weight of the fight ahead. This wasn't just about our ridge anymore. It was about every family, every piece of land, every kid who just wanted to scatter ash or water roses or live free. Marla had started a war, but we were building an army. The ridge woke up angry. The pines stood taller, the creek ran louder, and the air carried a charge, like the world knew a reckoning was coming. Caleb was out by the fire pit at dawn, same as always, scattering ash with that quiet focus that made him seem older than 8. But his shoulders were squared now, his jaw set, like he'd inherited the fight overnight. The bruise on his shoulder was fading, but the mark Marla left wasn't just skin deep. It was in his eyes, in the way he glanced at the driveway, waiting for her to come back. And I knew she would. People like Marla don't slink away. He doubled down, claw harder, burn everything to keep their throne. But this wasn't her ridge. It was ours. And today, we'd end this. I'd spent the night on the phone with Ruiz, my old ATF contact now with the FBI. The dossier we'd built, pages of forged signatures, bank records, complaints from neighbors. And Tommy's Livestream shad lit a fire under the feds. "She's done," Ruiz said, his voice crackling through the line. "We've got warrants for fraud, embezzlement, and assault. She's got no idea what's coming, but I wasn't waiting for the feds to clean this up." Marla had made it personal when she touched Caleb. This was my fight, and I'd finish it my way. The motion sensors pinged at 8:03 a.m., a sharp buzz that cut through the morning fog. I was on the porch, my old service knife in my belt, a thermos of coffee in one hand, and my ATF badge in my pocket, just in case. Caleb looked up from the fire pit, ash smudged across his knuckles, and nodded at me. No words, just trust. He knew I'd handle it. I stepped off the porch as Marla's white SUV roared up the drive, kicking gravel like a tantrum. She wasn't alone. Kessler was back, his scowl deeper, his cheap suit swapped for tactical pants, like he thought he was going to war. Vaughn, the slick lawyer, was there too, holding a briefcase that probably cost more than my cabin. And behind them, a new facial woman in her 50s, gray hair in a tight bun, carrying a clipboard and a badge that read County Compliance Officer. Marla had called in the cavalry. She didn't bother with her fake smile this time. Her face was all hard lines, her eyes burning with something Dangrau's desperation. "Jameson," she said, stepping out of the SUV, "you've gone too far. This is Ms. Hargrove, County Liaison. We're here to enforce an emergency injunction. Your property's been deemed a public hazard, and you're to vacate immediately." I didn't move. "You're on my land," I said, my voice steady, "and your HOA's a fraud. I've got proof, and so do the feds. You're not taking anything." Ms. Hargrove, the county woman, stepped forward, her clipboard raised like a shield. "Mr. Jameson, I've reviewed the association's filings. They're in order. Your fire pit violates safety codes, and your son's ash scattering is a documented hazard. You've got 24 hours to comply, or we'll escalate to seizure." I laughed, short and cold. "Filings? You mean the forged signatures Marla's been peddling? The bank accounts she's been draining? Check your records again, lady. You're backing a con artist." Hargrove's eyes flickered, but she didn't back down. "The county recognizes the Ridgeview Community Association. You're out of compliance, and your actions yesterday assaulting Ms. Marla and her staff have been noted." Caleb stepped forward, bucket in hand, his voice cutting through the morning air. "She hit me first," he said. "She hurt my shoulder. She's the one breaking the law." Marla's face twisted. "That child's lying. He's a danger to the community, just like his father." That's when I felt the same heat I'd felt in the desert, running ops for ATF, when the line between right and wrong wasn't a debate, but a blade. I stepped closer, my hand resting on the knife at my belt. "You don't talk about my son," I said, my voice low, sharp, the kind that makes people listen. "You touched him. You hurt him. And now you're standing on my land, threatening my family. You're not walking away from this." Kessler moved, his hand twitching toward his pocket, but I was faster. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and slammed him against the SUV. The metal groaned, and he grunted, his face pressed against the window. "Don't," I said. "You're not ready for this." Vaughn raised his briefcase like it was a weapon. "This is assault. You're done, Jameson. We've got witnesses." I turned to him, my eyes locked on his. "Witnesses? Look round." The ridge was waking up. Neighbors were gathering, stepping out from behind trees, lining the driveway, phones raised. Mrs. Larson, clutching her folder of notices. Tate, leaning on his cane, his manila folder of emails tucked under his arm. Jenny, her eyes red but fierce, holding screenshots of Marla's threats. And Tommy, the kid with the phone, live streaming to millions, his voice steady. "Yo, chat, HOA lady's back, and she brought a squad. But we've got an army." Marla's eyes darted to the crowd, and for the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. She turned to Hargrove. "Do your job. Arrest him." But Hargrove hesitated, her clipboard lowering slightly. "Ma'am, I need to see the association's charter. The original, not a copy." Marla's face went white. "It's at S in the office," she stammered. "But I assure you." "Then you've got no authority," I cut in. "I've got proof your HOA's a scam. Forged signatures, fake votes, stolen money. The feds are coming, Marla. You're done." Vaughn stepped forward, his voice smooth but strained. "You're bluffing. You're a washed-up Fed with no pull. This ridge is under county jurisdiction now, and you're out of time." That's when I pulled the badge from my pocket, the silver seal catching the sunlight like a blade. "James Jameson, former ATF, Assistant Director's Office. I've got contacts in D.C. who've been tracking your boss for years. You want to talk jurisdiction? Let's talk about fraud, embezzlement, and assault on a minor." Hargrove's eyes widened, her clipboard dropping to her side. Kessler, still pinned against the SUV, muttered, "This is bullshit." Marla screamed, her voice cracking. "He's lying. He's a nobody. Arrest him." But the crowd was growing, their voices rising. Mrs. Larson stepped forward, holding up her folder. "She fined me $800 for wildflowers my mother planted. She said they were a disgrace." Tate raised his folder. "She threatened to seize my garage because I built a ramp. Called it unpermitted." Jenny's voice shook but didn't break. "She shut down my bakery. I lost everything because of her lies." Tommy zoomed in, his phone steady. "Chat's at 20 million views. They're calling for her head." Hargrove turned to Marla, her face hard. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. We've got questions about your association's legitimacy." Marla lunged at me, her nails clawing at my face, but I caught her wrist and twisted it, forcing her to her knees. "You're done," I said, my voice calm but cold. "You touched my son. You tried to take our land. You don't get to walk away." Deputy Hargrove, the one who'd been here before, pulled up just then, his patrol car screeching to a stop. He jumped out, hand on his taser, eyes scanning the scene. "What's going on?" Marla screamed. "He assaulted me. Arrest him." But Caleb stepped forward, bucket in hand, ash smudged across his face. "She tried to hit me again," he said. "Dad stopped her. She's been lying to everyone." Hargrove looked at the crowd, at the phones, at Tommy's live stream. "Ma'am," he said to Marla, "you're under arrest for trespassing, assault, and suspected fraud. Turn around." Marla thrashed as the cuffs clicked round her wrists, her tablet falling to the ground. Screen shattering. "You can't do this," she screamed. "I built this community. You're nothing without me." I leaned in close, my voice barely a whisper. "You didn't build anything. You broke it. And now we're taking it back." Hargrove led her to the patrol car, her screams echoing across the ridge. Kessler and Vaughn tried to slip away, but the crowd blocked their path, phones raised, voices loud. "You're not going anywhere," Mrs. Larson said, her folder shaking in her hands. "You helped her. You're part of this." Hargrove's partner, a younger deputy, stepped out of the car, cuffs in hand. "You two, stay put. We've got questions for you too." Tommy's voice cut through the noise. "Yo, chat, we did it. HOA's done. 25 million views." The crowd roared, a sound that shook the pines, like the ridge itself was cheering. Caleb stood beside me, bucket dangling from his hand. His eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in weeks. "Shope, is she gone for good?" he asked. I nodded. "She's gone, and she's not coming back." The ridge didn't settle right away. The air stayed charged, like it was waiting for one last spark. Neighbors lingered, swapping stories, their voices a mix of relief and rage. Mrs. Larson burned her notices in the fire pit, the flames eating Marla's fake seal like it was nothing. Tate tore up his emails, tossing the scraps into the wind. Jenny cried, but they were good tears, the kind that come when you realize you're free. Tommy kept filming, his phone a beacon, broadcasting the ridge's victory to the world. That night, we gathered around the fire pit again, the flames higher than ever, the cedar smoke curling into the stars. Caleb sat beside me, his bucket at his feet, ash smudged across his cheek. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. His eyes said it all had fought, and he'd won. Not just for himself, but for the ridge, for the pines, for the land that had held us for a century. Ruiz called at midnight. "She's in custody," he said. "Feds raided her office, found everything: fake charters, offshore accounts, even a ledger of blackmail. She's looking at 10 years minimum. You did good, Jameson." I didn't care about the praise. I cared about Caleb, about the neighbors, about the fire pit that still burned. "What about her crew?" I asked. "Kessler's talking. Vaughn's trying to cut a deal. They're done." I hung up and looked at Caleb, who was staring into the fire. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then looked up at me. "Can I keep scattering ash?" I smiled, my hand on his shoulder. "Every damn day, kid. This ridge is yours." The weeks that followed were quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the tense, held breath quiet before a storm, but the kind that comes after one. When the air feels clean and the world feels new. The neighbors started rebuilding not houses, but trust. Mrs. Larson planted more wildflowers, a whole field of them, bright as a middle finger to Marla's rules. Tate fixed his ramp, painted it red just because he could. Jenny reopened her bakery, and the smell of fresh bread drifted across the ridge every morning. Tommy's live streams shifted from Marla's downfall to stories of the ridge kids fishing in the creek. Old folks swapping stories, Caleb scattering ash like it was a sacred duty. But Marla wasn't entirely gone. Not yet. A month later, I found an envelope in the mailbox, no return address. Just a postcard with a photo of her, standing in front of a new office. A sign reading New Ridgeview Community Initiative. She was smiling, but her eyes were hollow, like she knew she'd lost something she couldn't get back. On the back, for words, "You haven't won yet." I tore it in half, tossed it into the fire pit, and watched it burn. Caleb looked up from his bucket, ash smudged across his hands. "Was that her?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "but she's nothing now." He nodded, then went back to scattering ash, his movement steady, sure. The ridge was ours again, not because we'd fought, but because we'd stood together. Marla had come to conquer, to carve up our land with her rules and her lies. But she'd forgotten something. England like this doesn't bow. Neither do the people who love it. 6 months later, the ridge was alive. The pines stood tall, the creek ran clear, and the fire pit burned every night. A beacon for anyone who needed it. Caleb had grown, not just in height, but in something deeper. Something forged in the fight. He still scattered ash every morning, but now he did it with a smile. Like he knew the trees were listening. The neighbors didn't just wave from their porches anymore. They stopped, talked, shared. The ridge wasn't just a place now. It was a family. One evening, as the sun melted into the valley, Caleb and I sat by the fire pit, the flames crackling under a sky full of stars. He held his bucket, ash smudged across his cheek, and looked at me. "Dad," he said, "do you think she'll ever come back?" I leaned back, the cedar smoke curling around us. "Maybe," I said, "but if she does, she'll find a ridge that doesn't kneel. And she'll find us." He smiled, small but fierce, and tossed a handful of ash into the fire. The flames flared, bright and wild, and for the first time in a long time. I wasn't watching the driveway. I wasn't listening for gravel. I was just here, with my son, on our land, breathing. The story of the ridge spread, not just on Tommy's streams, but across the country. People sent letters, emails, even showed up with their own stories of fighting back against HOA letters, against bullies, against anyone who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. The Ridge became a symbol, a reminder that power isn't in clipboards or badges or rules. It's in the people who stand up, who say, "Not here. Not to my family." Marla's trial came and went. She got 12 years fraud, embezzlement, assault. Kessler flipped, testified against her for a lighter sentence. Vaughn disappeared, probably hiding in some city where no one knows his name. The county fired Ms. Hargrove, and the Ridgeview Community Association was dissolved. Its fake charter burned in the same fire pit where we burned Marla's notices. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in Caleb, scattering ash every morning, his bucket dented but unbroken. It was in Mrs. Larson's wildflowers, Tate's red ramp, Jenny's bread. It was in the Ridge, standing tall, untouched by Marla's lies. We didn't just win a fight. We took back our home. And if you're out there, if you've ever felt a Marla breathing down your neck, trying to take what's yours, remember this: you're not alone. You're not weak. You've got a voice, a truth, and a fire that no clipboard can put out. So stand up, speak loud, and if they come for your land, your family, your peace, let them know you protect yours.